quality therapy. People have improvements in their Parkinson's symptoms, maybe not immediately after exercise, but people who adopt an exercise program, they have fewer tremors, less stiffness, improved balance. You're fighting against the disease, you're taking control of your disease. People go from being withdrawn, being isolated and immobile to coming back to life, and I think everyone should have a chance to access that.
I was worse than this, a lot worse than this, 3 years into the disease. Now I'm 15 years into the disease, and I'm doing better than I was back then. Back then I couldn't write my name.
Progression of my disease has slowed down tremendously. This place gives you hope.
Before I came here, I would think I'm the only person in the world with Parkinson's. That's not true. We are now a family. We really are a family. I immediately recognized, first of all, I'm not alone. And that's important.
Any place could do rock steady boxing, and so our vision and my hope is that someday when somebody says you have Parkinson's disease, they'll follow it with, there's a gym down the street where you can fight back.
What did your friends and family say when you told them that you were boxing?
They laughed. But now, they don't laugh anymore.
We've only seen that 300 times and we still cry every time. People need to know at day of diagnosis that this thing is manageable with exercise, with friendships, with the right medications, with different medical therapies, complementary therapies. I don't know that everyone is hearing that diagnosis, but my husband having Parkinson's for 20 years, and he's driving, he's volunteering, he has a good life. And people need to hear that message, that you can still live a full and healthy life with proper disease management. So what do we know about Parkinson's? The facts about Parkinson's. So if you look in the dictionary or Google, this is typically what you see, which is really unfortunate because it's not what we see, is this little graphic on the side. We know that it's chronic, progressive, neurological disorder. Symptoms tend to get worse over time. About 1.5 million people in the US alone have Parkinson's, and all of you know, and I know, that there's a lot more Parkinson's walking around than 1.5 million people. Current treatments are medication and deep brain stimulation therapy, and it is now known, thank goodness, that exercise can help slow progression of the disease. Yeah, that's great. And we also know that there is no cure currently. So what can happen after the diagnosis is often going home with a feeling of helplessness without the proper resources. Most people have a tendency to decline emotionally, and that can happen physically too. Fear and isolation can happen without proper resources, feeling of helplessness, downward spiral, and few resources available. This is how it used to be. This is the very interesting epidemiological study that shows the United States and the red areas being the highest rate of Parkinson's. This is controlled per population per 100,000 people. So agriculture, industry, you see the different areas that are higher rate of Parkinson's disease.
Look at New Jersey.
Uh-oh, New Jersey.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So one of the big questions that we get is why boxing? What is it? We obviously now know what we didn't know over 10 years ago was that exercise could be a combatant to Parkinson's disease. When we started this, there was no research about this. There was I think one other organization that was starting to do something similar. So we didn't have a lot of tools to help train for this. What we know now, thank goodness, 12 years later, 13 years later, is that exercise can be a combatant to Parkinson's disease, and this has been proven through several human studies and also animal studies. They're finally on board, and the medical community is backing this concept, and we know from proof from seeing our people that people are feeling better. One of the most popular studies that's out there, this was a very small study, but it's one of the more well-known studies. Are you guys familiar with this tandem cycle study that happened at the Cleveland Clinic? This was a very small study that included 10 people with Parkinson's, and what they did in this study was they put 5 people on a recumbent bike to go at their own pace, and they put the other half of the sample on a tandem bicycle with a professional bicyclist. And they pushed these people for 8 weeks, 3 times a week for 1 hour, and what it showed at the end of the study was that both parties actually felt better and had some improvements in their Parkinson's symptoms. But the folks that were pushed at a forced intense rate with the professional cyclist had a much higher, much more significant reduction in their Parkinson's symptoms. So what this study showed us, along with dozens, probably hundreds at this point, studies, is that exercise can help Parkinson's, but it's this concept of what's called forced intense exercise or high intensity exercise that can have the most dramatic effect in helping people feel better. But what does forced intense exercise mean for somebody like Tom Timberlake, who can still run 3 miles and do 25 push-ups? That's forced intense exercise for him, but if you have somebody in later stage Parkinson's who might not be able to walk anymore, might be in a wheelchair, what does forced intense exercise look like for that individual? Well, that very well may mean that this individual got out of the house, got into a car, drove to their exercise program, got out of the car, might be just pushing some weights around that day and doing some activity, but that's a lot more activity than if they didn't have the choice to go out and do something. So if they were just sitting home all the time. So by having these programs, we're giving people an opportunity to get out of the house and be with trained individuals, be around other people with Parkinson's disease, to do more than they thought they could do on their own. So if we know that forced intense exercise can be a combatant to Parkinson's disease, then what types of activities should we be doing? There was another study done by ESPN. This had nothing to do with Parkinson's disease. This was a study that was done by a panel of scientists from the United States Olympic Committee. And what they did was they tested 60 different sports on their degree of difficulty within the training. So they tested on these 10 different degrees of difficulty within the training for mainstream sports. So these were things like baseball, basketball, boxing, dancing. And what they found at the end of this study was the training that boxers do, the conditioning of boxing, was rated the #1 most demanding sports of all sports. And those of you that are involved in the boxing program, you could probably attest to that. It is challenging. It is much more. I think if you don't understand the training that goes into boxing, you probably just assume that boxers go and hit a heavy bag for an hour or 2 hours. But there is a lot that goes into a fighter's curriculum that happen to be really good for people with Parkinson's. It's a lot of balance training, it's a lot of agility, a lot of hand-eye coordination, and it's fun. If your doctor told you that you had Parkinson's disease and said you need to start exercising, and maybe you were an avid tennis player before, and you thought, tennis is hard, right? You might find yourself not the same tennis player that you were prior to Parkinson's disease. So about 95% of the people that come into our program have never boxed before. So it's a new skill, and it's just a lot of fun.
Coaches might be able to chime in on this one, but we love it when we have visitors, the kids of boxers who come in from out of town, they're visiting from college, and they can't keep up with our members. And coaches, does that happen here? Go ahead. But we love when that happens. Yeah.
Well, we haven't had too many people, outside visitors, because of the size of our room.
Right.
But we've had some kids looking in from the outside.
Okay. So we talked about what can happen if there is no intervention, no resources when you get a diagnosis and go home. Tom and I went home and we pretty much descended into a really bad place for 6 years because there were no resources in the dark ages. So it's really, really important to intervene as soon as possible at the day of diagnosis, ideally, or soon after, so those symptoms don't have a chance to creep in: depression, anxiety, fear. So Rocksteady wants to intervene at day of diagnosis. We have actually had people come in with a prescription right from the neurologist's office before they even told their family, because they wanted to let their family know that they were going to be okay and they had some resources. We provide hope, joy, and laughter. I saw it this morning in a non-clinical environment. No disrespect to the clinicians, but some of our members spend a lot of time at the doctor's office, and we want to be a gym. We want these folks to be athletes and respect them as athletes. Recognizing the value of the individual not being defined by your diagnosis. Really, really important here. Something about Parkinson's and the management of it from a medical perspective. There are lots and lots of pills to take every day. And I think sometimes folks can feel reminded, that your people can become the disease, which doesn't have to happen. We want to know who you are, what you did, what kind of athlete you were. Providing a sense of community. You guys had 4 or 5 people this morning, and it was a community. It was beautiful. And celebrating everyday victories, small victories, if that's getting out of the house and coming in instead of sitting around watching The Price is Right. I mean, that's a big deal. So small victories can be someone makes it to the gym and just sits down and socializes with their buddies because they didn't get a good night of sleep. We're going to celebrate that.
So I think we think there's really something special about these Rocksteady programs for people with Parkinson's, because the medical community, the neurologists, are now really pushing for exercise, right? You might have been told when you were diagnosed that you need to find a program, you need to get involved in some kind of activity. But let's face it, we've had a lot of people say, I'm too self-conscious to go into an LA Fitness or to go into a Gold's Gym because people see my tremor or my shuffling gait and don't understand that there might be something wrong with me. We think that that's why people tend to become more isolated, because they don't want to be out in public with some of these symptoms. So by having a Rocksteady program in place that is geared towards the disease, and everybody in the classroom has that camaraderie, everybody understands what the family's going through, there's something to be said about that unity and that teamwork, and being able to provide programs for these people who really need this exercise. And we've talked a little bit about Parkinson's disease. On your left side, these are our classic motor and non-motor symptoms that we have all learned about, that we all see, different combinations of things like the tremor, the bradykinesia, which is slowness of movement, a lot of postural instability, a lot of balance problems, small movements, the shuffling gait, the freezing. These are kind of the classic outward symptoms that people see. But also the non-motor symptoms, which people don't talk about as often, but are a significant issue for people with Parkinson's. Things like the cognitive challenges, things like depression, anxiety, emotional changes, fear. These are organic symptoms of the disease itself. Let's talk for a minute about the way that fighters or boxers condition. So, as I said before, boxers have to train for a whole slew of things to be a good athlete. You have to train for things like hand-eye coordination. We have to train for speed of movement. We've got to have great flexibility, optimal balance. You're in awkward positions and have to fire off a shot or move out of the way. Core strength, agility, rapid muscle fire. So being able to put your mind where your muscle is and react quickly. But also the secondary benefits of this style of training. Improved mental focus. It's much more than throwing a punch. There's a lot of numerical patterns and cognitive challenges with this style of workout. Reduction of stress, just overall mood enhancement. We've seen a lot of people come in really not in a good mood, and there's something to be said. This is innate in all of us. When you punch something, or you kick something, or you slam something, there's kind of an emotional elevation that happens, right? How many people have lost their temper and slammed the door before? How many people have thrown their keys across the parking lot? When you get to a moment and there's that emotional charge and outburst, we really do think there's something to that. It's helping people feel better. And I can also attest to the emotional factor. She and I both still go to retreat to a boxing workout when we're having a bad day, because let's face it, we feel better when we exercise, and punching stuff just feels good. That's the science behind the whole thing.
So, the Rocksteady coaches in here, you guys have the best of the best in here. I remember all of them, and it's really good to see you guys again. They've been through a lot of training, and they continue their training. They continue their education. I was talking to Olga this morning, and she's always searching for new ways to make the program fresh and new. So what the outside world doesn't realize when they see a boxing program like Rocksteady Boxing, that there is actually a structure and a science behind the madness. It's not just people wailing on heavy bags. They're designing things based on symptoms. And you may not know that what they're making you do this day is working on your posture. They may not tell you that getting up and down off the floor isn't about, we're going to relax on the floor and do some yoga. It's about becoming familiar with the floor, so if you do happen to fall on the floor, you know how to get back up. So there is a structure behind it, and this thing has been designed with the assistance of a medical advisory team. And I just want to give credit to your coaches, because you guys are amazing. You guys are amazing at what you do. Thank you so much. We're going to show you a little bit.
There's a method to the madness.
Yep. Now you know our secrets. So we don't all distinguish levels. Some people call the different times of day classes like the Silver Tigers or the Golden Bears or the Brawler class. But as headquarters, we were kind of forced as a teaching facility to make levels. So our highest intensity workout, like we saw this morning, they're going pretty much all out. And those folks have been designated to the level 1 class appropriately based on different things. Things like, being able to go to maximum heart rate, not having a lot of orthopedic issues. It feels good to be able to be in the class that's appropriate for your functioning and challenging the guy next to you. The second level class, symptoms start to appear a little bit, but this is going to require that the coaches have a better understanding of Parkinson's disease. Starting to work with people on the symptoms that they see. They're not just saying stand up straight. They're telling you these are the exercises that are going to help strengthen the weak muscles, and these are the exercises that are going to help relax the overworked muscles. Trying to help you guys regain symmetry in your body, which is possible. You don't have to become rigid on one side of the body. It is not inevitable, but you know you have to work hard at it. So as we go into later stage Parkinson's, or it's most likely other issues, orthopedic issues, heart issues, things are a little slower, not as intense, but the love, the community, the joy, the acceptance is the same across all classes. And that's the universal message that we want to put out there. It doesn't matter what stage you're in. We have never turned anybody away. People that are 35 years old have come to the gym. People that are 100 have come to the gym. We're going to figure it out.
Quick story about a gentleman that came to our level 4 class. This gentleman lived out in California and was what they considered end-stage Parkinson's, and the family his sons and daughters all lived in Indianapolis, so the family decided to put this gentleman on hospice and bring him to Indianapolis to take good care of him for the last part of his last days. They came to Indy and they found out that Rocksteady was in motion right down the road, and they wheeled their father into the gym, and at that time he was not communicating, not really able to sit up on his own. Within 2 years, so guy went from hospice to no hospice, and for 2 years was in our program. This guy graduated from his wheelchair to a walker, eventually started coming in with a cane. He became the social chairman for his class. He was running. He started learning how to throw kicks on the bag, and it was hilarious. I mean, just completely came back from it, and it just goes to show you that you can't count people out. There's a fight left inside. This gentleman has since passed away, but for the last 2 years of his life, he was a boxer. And his grandkids would come to the gym and box with him, and he had a voice, and he was important, and that's the kind of stuff that makes programs like this so important. And we just like to share stories like that because people might think, oh, the level 4 class, that's gotta be so sad. Heck no, we have a blast with these guys. They're goofy, they tell really bad jokes. They have parties, they like to listen to raunchy music. It's a party every day at Rock Steady Boxing. I'm sure you guys, looks like you're having a blast here too. Aside from the boxing component of what Rock Steady does though, one of the biggest responsibilities that our coaches have is understanding functional fitness, or ADLs, activities of daily living. So we're not just strapping boxing gloves on and hitting heavy bags and hitting the mitts the entire workout. We as coaches have the additional responsibility to help people with the things that Parkinson's disease is making them struggle with. So we have to be informed on how to help people walk better. We actually teach people how to fall safely, if you can believe that. We teach people that everybody needs to have a close personal relationship with the ground, because we're all going to be there. We've even fallen in the gym.
We never force the issue. If someone's not comfortable, that's not a drill that we'll do with them. But most people
are open to it.
Yeah.
There are proper ways to fall forward and to fall backwards to minimize the amount of injury that you may have. So we talk about those things. Getting up and down safely. We want people to be able to independently get up and down out of a chair without using their arms. We want to try to encourage people to get on the floor and off the floor by themselves. That could save a life. And certainly if you're stuck in a chair, that's going to minimize your quality of life, because maybe you're not going to want to go out to dinner with your friends because you don't know if you can get out of a chair at dinner. We want to help people be empowered to do these kinds of things. Voice activation. There's a lot of yelling and screaming that goes on. I'm sure that drives the residents crazy here. Are you guys noisy? Yes. But there's purpose behind that. Do you know why we have to work on our voices? It's for one, it's communication, but two, it's